Alright, so our project is on interest groups and the mass media. So, a little bit of background. James Madison warned us against factions, but separation of powers would fix that. So that would be like also a big republic as well. So, what is an interest group? It is a group of private citizens whose goal is to influence and shape public policy. They are not political parties. They try to change policies that affect the parties. So, for example, parties, all their goal is to win elections. Interest groups support candidates to promote their point of view. And a big difference between political parties and interest groups is you can be in multiple interest groups, but you can't be in multiple parties. What do interest groups do? They raise awareness and stimulate interest in public affairs by educating members and the public. They serve as a linkage institution between members and government, and provide channels for political participation that enable citizens to work together to achieve a common goal.
Alright, types of interest groups. The majority of interest groups are formed based off economic interests. One being labor groups, which protect and promote the interest of organized labor. Example of these groups include the AFL, the CIO, and the Teamsters Union. There's business groups which promote and protect business interests in general. There's professional groups which set standards of the professional, hold professional meetings, and publish journals. And there's agricultural groups which promote general agricultural interests. And Teamsters is a labor union which was formed in 1903. The Teamsters Union is one of the largest in the world. Interest groups that promote causes. Specific causes include American Civil Liberties Union, the National Rifle Association. There's welfare-specific group of individuals, which include American Association of Retired Persons, Veterans of Foreign Wars. Religion-related causes include National Council of Churches, American Jewish Congress. The public interest groups. These interest groups are primarily concerned with issues regarding mainly the environment, consumer protection, crime, and civil rights. Public interests include Common Cause, League of Women Voters, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Strategies of interest groups. Interest groups influence elections by encouraging and persuading members of their groups to vote for candidates who support their views. They also influence the party platforms and the nominations of candidates, campaigning, and by contributing money to political parties through what is known as PACs. They use lobbying, meaning they are attempting to influence policymaking by providing data to the government and trying to convince them to support their case. Direct lobbying means that they are using personal contacts between lobbyists and makers. Litigation, as used by the NAACP to argue segregation in the 1950s, is usually used by groups when they are unsuccessful in gaining the support of Congress on any issue that they feel is important. Political action committees, known as PACs. PACs were formed as a form of political arms for the different types of interest groups. However, PACs are regulated often by federal laws. PACs most register with the federal government in order to raise money for multiple contributors, which donate to several candidates, and there are, like I said, there's strict rules which limit them. Regulation of interest groups. These regulations attempt to regulate lobbying. Attempt to regulate lobbying was established in 1946 with the passage of the Federal Regulation of Lobbying Act. The purpose of this law was for those who were trying to persuade members of Congress in any form or way. In 1955, the Lobbying Disclosure Act was passed by Congress, which created much more strict regulations, which required registration if lobbying was directed at members of Congress, congressional staff, or policymakers with the executive branch.
Mass media. All forms of communication that transmit information to the general public. Mass media is the only linkage mechanism that specializes in communication. And other forms of communication between the government and citizens include political parties, interest groups, voting, and also the development of modern media in the U.S. shows how the country has grown as a whole over time. There are many forms of media. The media comes in newspapers and magazines, television and radio, and over the internet. It also serves as an effective check on government, and due to the price of media platforms dropping, it's now available to more people. And newspapers help by, it's usually known as the earliest form of media, dating back to colonial times. And by the 1890s, every major city had a daily newspaper. And through television, it's also known that 47% of conservatives watch Fox News. And radio began in the 1920s and was widely popular during its time. The radio turned new personalities into celebrities. And for the internet, the worldwide is becoming increasingly popular among citizens today. And all these medias can be found online and have their own websites, radio, podcasts, blogs, and much more.
Roles of the media: manipulating public opinion, creating awareness, linking the citizens and the government, acting as a watchdog, and influencing agenda setting. What makes the media in the U.S. different than other places? The mass media in the United States of America are privately owned. This allows for much more political freedom that may be allowed in other countries. Many citizens of the U.S. also look to mass media for political guidance, while many others around the world are pressured to keep their views similar to the uppers and ignore the media. Since the media can decide on what to report on, they are able to shape public opinion by creating an idea of what issues are important. How do journalists gather information? Information links, news conference, news briefings, and news releases. Are there any limits? The Federal Communications Act of 1934 led to the creation of the FCC, which is an independent regulatory agency that regulates interstate and foreign communication by radio, television, telephone, telegraph, cable, and satellite. Off the record, which means when a journalist agrees to gather off-the-record information, it may not be used. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 helped regulate the control and ownership of broadcasting companies. That's it.
Yeah, us.